Hi, and welcome to week 3 of our series, Free to Forgive. And this week, Hannah, we're talking about forgiveness being a process. So forgiveness is a process. So explain what that means to our wonderful viewers.
Yeah, well, firstly, so forgiveness is such a broad topic that there's the day-to-day offences, they're the things that we are having to process every single day, that someone's offended us, and maybe it's in our marriage, just on the street, just wherever you are, there's those day-to-day offences.
I don't have any problems in my marriage, so I don't know.
I pointed at you.
Perfect marriage, but you're married to Pastor Byron, and so I understand why
it's
you
a bit
would
more
bring these things
relatable.
up. Yeah.
And with those day-to-day offences, it's important that we have to keep processing those things. And I'm a firm believer that doing relationships and life with people is doing the highs and the lows. And oftentimes we're just in for the highs and we jump out when we hit the lows. But like any healthy family or relationship, it's both of those, the highs and the lows, where you're growing and there's a greater intimacy and depth in that relationship. So I think even sometimes in church, we can get really, if we get offended, we just want to jump out, or a friendship, we want to jump out when there's a low. But healthy relationships consist of both the highs and the lows. So we need to learn how to do that, how to keep short accounts with people, and growing through offences, and learning how to process those well with God, and going back to people and making things right where necessary. So there's that one aspect of day-to-day offences, but then there's also the bigger things that we walk through in life that actually have been really hurtful, have harmed us, and actually are not easy to process. So maybe one day we made a decision to forgive, but then we've got to walk out that forgiveness. And I like this scripture from Matthew 18:21-22, and you may have heard it before, but it's, then Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? And Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. And that's how much we've been forgiven, but we've also got to offer that forgiveness to others. And sometimes we've made a decision that I'm going to forgive, and then something triggers us and we're hurt again, and we come back to that again. But Jesus is saying in this passage that I want you to forgive again and again and again, as much as 70 times.
So that's this lifestyle of forgiveness, because the numbers, it's almost a bit of hyperbole, isn't it? It's like, it's just a big number.
Yeah.
But the number's not, okay, so well, the question's almost like, what have I got to get away with forgiveness?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, can I just do this? And God's like, well, no, you might need to process things for a lifetime, but that's why we have the Holy Spirit as well, isn't it? That's why God says, Jesus, I'm not going to leave you or forsake you. I'm going to give you the one that's going to help you, that's going to comfort you, that can help navigate some of the bigger issues in life, as well as the smaller things. He's there with us all the time. And I think that's a real comfort for a lot of people to know that, again, we recognize we're talking about big issues. Yeah. These are big things in life that can be real blockages to your relationship with Christ and to you really living this overcoming life that's promised to us. So this lifestyle of forgiveness, so what does that look like then? This lifestyle of forgiveness, this 70 times 7 number?
Well, firstly, I think it's really important that we do acknowledge that people at home are really, in your e-groups there, you're facing some things right now that you need to forgive, and you have actually really been hurt, and there's things that you didn't deserve, and there was harm done to you that wasn't fair or easy. And I think it's important that we do start there and really acknowledge that, and acknowledge that we're talking about forgiveness. We're not justifying the abuser's behaviour, and we're not saying that you should just open your life back up to them again. But you forgive, and then you walk away from that, and then you've got to now walk out this forgiveness and process this healing with God. So every time you're triggered, it's going back to God and saying, God, can you help me in this area of my life where I'm feeling hurt here? But it doesn't mean we open ourselves back up to that abusive situation or whatever it may have been that was harmful to us.
So is there a distinction there between, that's a really good point, which we probably need to pause on. There's a distinction between the decision to forgive and this process of outworking that, right?
Absolutely.
So the decision is I choose to forgive you, but do we sometimes get confused with, but then why am I still feeling this? Why is it still sometimes hard? Why am I still feeling this pain, and sometimes there's anxiety associated with something that happened?
Yeah, and I've walked through this in my life, and there's some big things that I've had to personally forgive, but I still, even today, will have triggers at times where it hits on a nerve and like, oh, that thing again, why is that back? And it can be really frustrating at times, but I've learned to turn it around and just see it as, this isn't me going backwards now that I'm feeling this. This is just another layer of healing. And I think if you are walking through some really big things that you've found it hard to forgive, and maybe you've come to that point now of being able to forgive, but you realise there's still a residue, I think it is important to seek out counsel and to talk about that journey. I think there's a lot of healing in talking about our story and talking about what it is that we walk through that helps us leave it behind, it helps us let go, it helps us ultimately give it to God and put it into His hands.
So I think, really good thing again, just to touch on and to pause on that your e-group leader who's in the room, and everyone's looking at that person right now and pointing to them, they are there as really to help you navigate some of these bigger issues in life, not to solve all the problems, but to help navigate to maybe third-party support or services that can be offered in your community, wherever you are. Really important that you do search out those services as well and get the help that you actually need so that you can live in a place of wholeness,
Yeah, absolutely. And just being reminded that forgiveness is a way of life. It's not a one-time thing, and so not feeling awful and beating yourself up if you're coming back to it again and again, you're needing to process it. Like, you do have a choice and you can give it into God's hands, but there is a process of walking that out and realize this is a lifestyle of forgiveness. Every single day I'm going to have those day-to-day offenses, maybe my husband, maybe other things, probably my husband, and things I'm going to...
You said it, not me. You said it, but
things I'm going to have
we all thought it.
So I'm going to have to process that, and then I'm going to have to process some of the bigger things that I've walked through in my life that maybe haven't even come up yet, but are going to come up in time, and I'm going to be like, okay, God, I'm ready to address this. And I think it's just having a willingness in our heart to want to find healing and wanting to find that with God.
And that takes courage, doesn't it? To choose to go on that journey of freedom. Freedom doesn't come easily, and I guess again being conscious of the fact that there's an enemy actively working against us to try and block this area of freedom, to try and block these areas in our life, and we've got to recognise there are spiritual forces working against us. I think that's really important to acknowledge. We live in this natural world, but we are supernatural beings fighting a supernatural war. We don't wage war as humans do. We wage a spiritual war. Powers and principalities, we don't war against flesh and blood, and I think that's really important to acknowledge in this stuff as well.
And what really helps with that is actually not wanting to live reactionary and deciding that I'm going to live it my life by decision. So what I mean by that is, for me, I make some pre-decisions that before I get into a moment of potentially being offended by a friend or by other people, I've already made some pre-decisions in my life that this is how I'm going to be. This is the kind of things that I hold as values in my life, so that in the moment I'm not reactionary, but there's actually some decisions I've made. And I think that's a really good guard against the enemy's schemes, because he's all the time going to bring things against us in our day to try and drain us and pull us away from his purposes. And I think, we have to make some pre-decisions. So maybe that's something good to talk about in our e-groups tonight as well. Yeah,
that's good. I know that if I choose to go for a run, and if I decide I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. and go running, I know that the planned decision making is I've got to get my gear ready, I've got to get it by the door, or if I'm going somewhere, I take my gear with me. And I know that when I do that, I wake up in the morning, it's all there, it's ready for me, as opposed to, sometimes we can think, if I wake up in the morning, I'll do it. And we can't treat forgiveness like that. If a situation arises, I'll see how I go. I'll figure it out on the fly. It's like, we don't want to live our life like that. We've got to, living the life of freedom is a choice that we make, isn't it, every day?
Absolutely.
And I think, King David's prayer of, God, see if there was any wicked way within me. I love David's life because, again, we're constantly talking about every day he would connect his hurts and his fears and also his successes to God. He would always be talking to God all day, every day about stuff. And I think that relationship, of the closeness of relationship that we have with Jesus, helps us to navigate some of these things. Because again, it's good news, the gospel. We recognise that we have been saved, we have been set free.
Absolutely. And I think we all deserve to not have that pain and not carry that forward with us, and to stop suffering, and that's what he's given to us as a free gift, and we can give that to others ultimately so that we're free, so our hearts are free. So great end to week 3, trying to navigate again the fact that we are free, we've received forgiveness of God, we are free to forgive others, and again I love the fact that we've received this freedom, and so
how do we recognize that this is a process, this isn't a one-time decision. And look, again, we want to say if there's, we want to acknowledge that if you are still feeling pain, that's okay. Pain can sometimes, God can use the pain to overcome in your life as well. And so we want you to kind of open up that in your e-groups. Otherwise, have a great week, and we'll see you neek week for week 4. Have a good week.